Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. To begin with, we would like to thank architect Aziza Chaouni for giving us this opportunity to conduct this interview, and thank you for all for attending it. طبعا I will start directly. Architect Aziza, طبعا حشكرك تاني مرة بالعربي we will do this interview in English. Starting with your name, actually. I have some photos here that I would like to share, basically. And your name is actually linked to a city. So starting with your name, Chaouni is your root town, actually. So I would like to start from there. Can you tell us more about it?
Of course. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely honored to be here, among you. شكرا جزيلا. ألف مرات. So regarding Chaouen is a small town in the Rif Mountains in the north of Morocco. And this is where my great-grandfather, Mohammed bin Abdullah, was from. Like at the time, if you wanted to study beyond the Msid, which is the Quranic school, this was around the 1912s, you had to go to Fez, the city of Fez, which is the center of knowledge, because it had the university Al-Qarawiyyin. So at the time with Al-Azhar, those were the main center of knowledge, for several centuries. And to study law, and it goes that he went on a donkey's back for months, and all his money was stolen, and it took him a very long time. Some people said that he had to run away from something in Chaouen. We still don't know what it was from, and he went to Fez seeking it. So it's still a myth, but the point is that he arrived in Fez to study in Al-Qarawiyyin, that we can discuss. And he married Aziza, who was my great-grandfather. Mohammed Abdullah, my great-father, when he was, there were many Ben Abdullahs, and they would say, who's from Chaouen? The Chaouni. So my last Abdullah, which carries the story of this great-grandfather who wanted to study and came to Al-Qarawiyyin.
Okay, so what was it like growing in Fas? And also share with us the influence from Qarawiyyin Library. How did the city's history and culture influence your interest in architecture?
World was named UNESCO World Heritage City in 1981 and is located in this valley that you can see here, surrounded by olive groves. And the Medina is a living Medina. Outside of the Medina, you can see here, actually in the farm they used to belong to my great-grandfather. But I would be visiting with my best friend, Amina, her grandmother, that lived in the old city. And we would actually go to the old city with my mother, with my best friend, to go buy certain things. So if you wanted to buy the babous, which are our traditional shoes, or some fabric to make traditional clothes, or certain food or delicacies, like we have this very famous goat cheese, you needed to go to specific places in the Medina. So the Medina of Fez has been and is still a living city, not a city for tourists, where sometimes craft that are century old are still passed down from father to son, and where there is importance on food and on craft. And so, like, I would say that for me, it was fantastic, a very fantastic childhood. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. You told me before that your grandfather built a mosque, and this had
Yes.
a big impact for you.
Indeed, yes. So if I am to extend, like a bit, so there was Fez, of course, there was Sidi Harazem that we can talk about later, where my grandmother would come visit us to go to the hot spring. That was a huge influence, but also the mountains that are nearby, the Atlas Mountains, where my grandfather had a farm. And this is the Qarawiyyin who studies. Yes. So here is my great-grandfather on the right. My father, who was, standing right next to him, Fuad. Allah rahmu. And they're in their house here in this photo, in their house in the Batha, which is their house in the old Medina. So they had a house in the old Medina and a farm. And then, and on the left, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, Aziza, that I'm named after, on the extreme right, exactly. And right next to her is my grandmother, Saida.
And
My grandfather,
I
yeah,
will
and
just
this
go
is
to the mountain, actually. Sorry.
yeah, this is the mountain. No, no, right before, exactly. So that's
Yeah.
no, the photo right before,
Oh,
please.
sorry.
Yes, so this is also the nearby. Yes, so Dait Hawa and Imouzer du Kandar. So this is where I also spend part of my summers, I would say most of my summers with my grandparents. And so my grandfather had a farm with for apples that have grown to become a successful business. And so he was, really contributing a lot to the economic life of this small village of Imouzer, where a lot of people from Fez would go in the hot summer months. And there were lakes that you can see. This is where I learned how to do planche à voile, which is how is it called in English? Like with the sail, and where you're on this board and you have a sail.
Okay.
Yes, and we used to fish in here, etc. So my grandfather, to come back to him, to help support the local community, decided to
Communities.
build a mosque for the community. And I remember going with him to the construction site, and there's one sentence that remained with me. So I was very happy to play on the sand and to play with the bricks, etc. But like I remember the community feeling extremely excited and happy and by this new mosque. But also my grandfather telling me, this is very important to me, because by building this mosque, I'm building myself a house in a paradise. And so this sentence actually stayed with me almost all my life. I was really struck, but like, oh, you're gonna build a house here, like a mosque here, but that's gonna serve the community, making all these people happy. But at the same time, this means that your house in paradise is gonna be ready for you. So this image remained engraved in my mind, and I guess maybe encouraged me to become an architect. But to this day, like I had shared with you, it remains my dream to build a mosque like my grandfather Muhammad.
Yeah. Before we wrap up with the family thing, even your aunts also had influence in your passion.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And one of
Yes,
them were actually was an architect.
yes, absolutely. So the sisters of my father, three of them were great, influences on me. One was the first female doctor in Morocco, an ophthalmologist, Aziza Chaouni Berbish, and who became also like a professor of medicine, but had and still has one of the largest contemporary art collections in Morocco. She was a doctor that loved art, loved architecture also, like an incredible woman, still alive. And my other aunt, Leila Chaouni, it was the first female publisher in Morocco, specializing in actually feminist press. She was the publisher of Fatima Bernisi, for example, and who actually played her publishing company, Le Fennec, contributed a lot to the spread of and development of feminist writing in Morocco. And finally, my other aunt, the third sister, Mounia Chaouni, was still an architect. And she was the youngest of my father's siblings. And for me, she was the ultimately coolest person ever, because she would show me her drawings, and then she would take me to see the building that she would complete. And for me, it was incredible to see something that was on the drawing board. At the time, people were not using computers still in the 90s.
It's coming up.
It's coming, yes. And so I was amazed at seeing people with these big tables and erasing, and they were also using, ink, black pens also, so you could not do a mistake for the final drawings. So I was amazed at that, but also seeing the complete project, right? And then this very beautiful spaces. But I was also felt extremely empowered as an Arab woman to see these three examples of these three women who were doing something that they felt very passionate about, for each one of them, and doing it with great passion and heart and independence.
Yeah. We are very interesting seeing these spaces or sites or locations that influenced your childhood, actually, that you return to them later on. So this is one of them, Sidi Harazem.
Yes.
So
Indeed. And I think that in retrospect, I mean, I was lucky to have very strong family ties with my, extended family, aunt and uncles, but also with my two parents, my mother and my father, who were extremely, encouraging of everything that I wanted to do. And I thank them for that. And I think this family ties made me really connected to the spaces the spaces that we were sharing or that we were using. And the thermal bath of Sidi Harazem that you can see here, this is where I used to go with my grandmother, who had Saida, who had rheumatisms, and who really believed that this water it's a hot spring that emerges next to a Sufi saint tomb, who's Sidi Harazem. He was buried there in the 12th century. So many people, including my grandmother, believe in the holy power of this water. And so they would drink it and bath in it. And then she would not feel any pain after 3 or 4 months. And then she would have to return.
Back again.
Yes, back again. So this is the pool that you can see here is fed by the hot spring. And at the end of every day or every 2 days, the water is drained into this laguna and it's filled up again. So it always has water. So even in hot water, so even in the winter, it's very pleasant. So yes, I mean, I had so many memories. I mean, this is one photo, but there are others maybe that you will share later. But the architecture by Jean-François Zévaco, this was built from 1960s to 1975. It's a very large complex, and it's a brutalist complex. I think it's the largest, I would say, brutalist leisure complex on the continent, on the African continent. And it's been throughout the years, so I constantly return to it. I had a lot of nostalgia, the specific food that you can get there,
Yes.
swimming, etc. And then every single year I would see that the place is getting worse and worse, sadly, because thermalism was a form of tourism that was very popular in the time of my grandmother for many reasons, but also because that was the main leisure, of activity. People go picnic, drink the water, swim, etc. A heritage, actually, Sidi Harazem, there are remnants from the Roman era. So spring was also used during the Roman era. And so when I've seen it being closed down, it made me very sad. And then when the owner, who's the pension fund, started to Moroccanize the architecture, adding tiles, Moroccan tiles to it, etc., that made me even more sad. But the truth, to be told, is that at the time I was an architecture student, but I didn't even know the name of the architect. No one around me knew who was the architect who did this thermal spring, I mean, it was not in any history books that, I was taught. And so what I realized is that a huge part of our architecture history in Morocco, especially post-colonial architecture, is not studied, was not surveyed. This was in 2003. And is magical, is fantastic. And it's an architecture of independence that reflected what Morocco wanted to be then, at the same time, progressive and modern, but also integrating certain elements of tradition that I can discuss more later, traditional materials, etc., passive systems for cooling. And so an extremely relevant architecture in today's time, where we deal about sustainability, about building an identity that is not pastiche, but that is reflecting the current time, but has a relationship to the local weather and traditions. So I got really inspired. And unfortunately, Zévaco died in 2003, exactly at the moment where in my graduate studies, I started to become interested in this architecture and wanted to investigate it more. So I never got to meet him. But yes, so in a sense, the strong ties I had to place to my culture, to my family, made me build this emotional bonds with this landscapes, with this architecture. And what you see behind me also, this is a column in Sidi Harazem. I really wanted to have this on my background.
We will see some photos in the next slides for it. I believe all this got blended, and then for sure your decision was to go to architecture field.
For sure. And what I can tell you is that I wanted to study from 18 years old. I wanted to be an architect, because for me, I mean, first of all, I had my aunt, she was the coolest woman, in the world. And I was looking up to her. You know, when you're a teenage girl, you need a role model. She was like my role model, and extremely also mentoring to me. She never told me I should study this. She told me just do whatever you feel very passionate about. But for me, it was a very creative field, but at the same time, something very concrete that you can, you know, immediately build something and have an impact on users and on communities. And this actually goes all the way back to that experience with my grandfather and his building of the mosque. That I think for me was extremely crucial moment of my childhood. I mean, it's retrospect, of course, but when I have to think about it, and actually it's by talking with you that I realized, as we're preparing for this interview, how important that moment was in defining probably, I mean, who I am to become. I mean, who we become is many influences: your education, your friends, your family, your surroundings, your readings, your travels. But for me, I think it has really to do a lot with my family and also to the spaces that I was using as a child.
But you didn't study architecture in the beginning.
No, exactly. So to come back, I wanted to study architecture at 18, and I had an uncle who was in New York City, the brother of my father, and he told my dad, "Oh, Aziza is a very good student. He should come to the USA. This is where the future is, etc., etc." My English was terrible, actually. I learned English when I was 14 by listening to Beatles songs, and you know, so I had to really prep up my English. So we said, you know, why not? So he helped me actually with the application. So it's thanks to him that I went to North America. But my father told me, listen, no, architecture is like, if you're gonna go so far away, you know, like why study architecture? The future is to become an engineer. I would prefer for you to be an engineer. I said, okay, Dad, I mean, I'm listening to you, you know, I'm a respectful child, but actually it was the best advice. So for anyone listening, yes, listen to your parents, because at the moment it might look like not like the best advice, but it became, because I studied, he didn't tell me which type of engineering. So of course I picked structural engineering with an environmental minor.
Some relevance, yeah.
Some relevance, but that gave me, and I studied it truly with passion also, but with in mind that I wanted to be able to do and to be able to calculate and think of the structure of my buildings, even you know, as an architect. So I studied then engineering, structural engineering, civil, at Columbia University, my alma mater. And then when I was done, I told, and I didn't tell my dad I was applying for Harvard. And then, you know, and when I got accepted to Harvard, I you know, for architecture, I told him, listen, Father Fuad, you know, like I listened to you. Look, I'm an engineer now. And so please, can I go to do my master's in architecture? And he saw that, he told me, he said, well, I always knew you were very strong-headed and that you never give up. And so, yes, you can go.
Yeah. Who were some key mentors during your education, and how did they influence you?
Well, you know, like what I can say is that at Columbia University, my professors were, you know, extremely supportive, you know, like they knew that that I wanted to go into, you know, architecture. And so they really, you know, encouraged me, you know, like to take a lot of minor courses in, you know, like in architecture, but also they really insisted, they knew that sustainability was going to be the hot topic of tomorrow. And they really encouraged me to also take advantage of the engineering faculty to take courses in, you know, environmental science. So this has been actually very important. And one of my professors there, Robert Silman, who was really a mentor. He was the head of the department back then, and I was lucky later on. So his office is the one that partnered with me to work on Sidi Harazem, on the rehabilitation.
Okay.
So it's been a very
Continued.
beautiful return. Yes, as you see, I'm extremely faithful individual. So, and at Harvard, several professors, Toshiko Mori, who was a Japanese American, you know, architect, who was the head of our architecture department. But Hashim Sarkis was, of course, I would say the most important, influence when I was at Harvard. He was heading the Aga Khan program. When I was there, he was my professor. He was my mentor. He was also my employer. I worked also very briefly for his office. And then my thesis advisor, as well. So you see many roles. Under him also, I was the co-founder of Club Medina, which is the first Eastern club at Harvard GSD that still exists today. And once again, I was so touched when they that is still existing, and now that they're inviting me back to lecture, and I'm so proud really that it's continuing now for 24 years. Wow. Yeah, and then the second person that was extremely crucial in my early years, that I was very lucky to work side by side by him, is Renzo Piano, that you all know, an incredible architect and the gentleman, I would have to say. Thanks, so it was a program that Harvard University has called the Renzo Piano Fellowship, where one student from Harvard every year or every 2 years is invited to join Renzo Piano in his office in a form of mentoring. So this is Renzo Piano did this in an homage to his brother, Hermano Piano, who died at a very early age, who was a builder. Who he believed in the mentoring format that the architecture discipline used to have, right? So you would not go to school, but you would learn with a mentor for several years. And so it was such a privilege to be working side by side with Renzo Piano, and like his generosity, his humility, but also the technical aspect of his work were incredible. And so I feel extremely privileged. And here once again, maybe for the people that are younger that are listening to us, certain ties that you create sometimes later in life might come back to you, because I worked closely with Renzo Piano, but also with one of his partners, because his office is the Renzo Piano Building Workshop, where there are several partners that are, it's a horizontal organization. Paul Vincent, and Paul Vincent was the project architect in his beautiful Centre Djibaou in New Caledonia. So actually, one of the best building I've ever seen is that cultural center. So if you don't know it, check it out. And one of the, again, buildings that looked great on photos, but when I went there and visited it, was one of the most, incredible experience. Completely massive cooling system. Was completed at the end of the 90s and still functioning amazing and beautiful. But why I'm saying this is because years later, the mayor of Nouméa in 2017 calls me, and I thought it was a prank or a joke. I didn't believe. I said, she told me, well, we want you to come work with us on this very difficult project, an urban project. And I didn't make the connection with Renzo Piano whatsoever. And so I thought it was a joke, and I told her, yeah, sure. And I hang up and I forgot about it for a week. And then I received all the email official invitation. And it was an incredible experience. Then years later, I hear that it's through Renzo Piano and Paul Vincent that they recommended me for this project. So anyways.
Yeah. During that, you started doing practice after finishing your academia, right?
Yeah, so after finishing, so I did this training with Renzo Piano. Then I was the thesis that I've done with Hashim Sarkis. So Hashim told me something that I repeat always to my own students. He said, I would only advise you as my thesis student if your project is something that would contribute to your home country. And to your home country in one way or another. And it was the time, it was in 2003, 2004, where Zaha Hadid and all this formal architecture was all the rage. And so I was telling him, but Hashim, but what can I do? And in my home in UNESCO with Heritage Cities and Old Town, he told me, no, otherwise I'm not advising you. And so that was the best advice, And then he told me, Aziza, you're the first Moroccan to graduate from Harvard Architecture School. You have a huge responsibility. So he tried to make me feel guilty. And then I said, yes, I'm extremely privileged to get this education, to get the opportunity that the education gave me to go and then work with Renzo Piano. So yes, okay, so I'm going to do something for Fez. And that was an amazing experience, because then my thesis, then Hashim told me, go take your thesis about the Faz River to the local authorities, speak with them, give it to them. If it can even affect how they're thinking, that's already something. You would have, affected something in your home country. And he told me, there's no better satisfaction than to do something for your own community. But at the time, I didn't actually, to be honest, I was skeptical, because I was, I see my future in North America, like why go back to Morocco, etc. But thanks to him, I came back to what truly I probably was meant to do. And then my project for the Fez River, that was a thesis project, became real. I readjusted it, because of course the thesis was extremely ambitious, and wanted to bring back the Qarawiyyin University back into the center of the town. But it had that environmental component of the river that was polluted. And this is the component that remained, and that became a real project. And this is how I started my office. But I remember telling Hashim, but I don't have enough experience. What am I to do? He said, no, just go for it. Do it. You're going to learn on the field.
I want to jump to the Sahara trip.
Yes.
Aziza Jones. Yes. I saw the photo there somewhere. Let's start with it. What got you interested in working on sustainable tourism projects in Sahara?
I will tell you. Yes. So I will tell you. So when I was working on my thesis with Hashim, first of all, I really was looking up to Hashim. He was at the same time, like a professor, a researcher, had his office in Lebanon, and with the branch in Cambridge. He really demonstrated to me live that it was possible. Yeah, so this thing. So what he told me after I graduated, he said, Aziza, great, it's great to do your practice, but he said, Harvard has all this traveling fellowship, you should apply to one. And I remember at the time also the head of Harvard had the Moroccan Studies Center that's funded by Morocco, and the head of it also, Sarah Miller, told me, you should, Aziza, don't, and I had a job in New York and possibility to, at the time my thesis was not yet becoming real. I was yet to bring it and show it around. But she also recommended to me that I should use these opportunities that Harvard has to offer to go research something that I would not have the chance to do later. And the desert has always, attracted me, but I knew only the desert in literature, and mainly through Jean-Marie G. Leclésio. So he's a Nobel Prize winner, actually, in literature, and a lot of his work, and he's married to a Moroccan woman, and I don't know if she's Moroccan or Algerian, and a lot of his work and novels take place in the desert. And I read all of his books on the deserts, and I speak really about the transformation also of the nomadic societies, and how the closing of borders by the colonial powers have led them to completely have to change their lifestyle and lose a lot of their culture and their souls. And the desert is always described as this extremely poetic and mysterious place that's as dangerous as it is inspiring.
And you got lost there.
Yes. And so I did. I proposed this trip, which today would be impossible, to go through all these countries, through Mali, to Libya. I went to Libya under Gaddafi, which was quite an experience, and Egypt. I ended up all the way actually in Sinai, which actually this map should have continued, and then to Jordan. And yes, this trip was life-changing, because I was, actually looking very precisely. I'm sorry, my son came to say hello.
Hi.
This is Hadi.
MashaAllah.
So for me to look actually at how people lived in the desert with so little, both in as building materials, but also as water resources and also food resources, was an eye opener. What I realized that how wasteful our way of buildings are. And hold on, I'm sorry.
Take your time.
Hadi, please. Hadi, bye. Sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
So yeah, so then it was a complete, eye, opener. And I spent, and this was like at least I think an 8-month trip. With that I planned very carefully, and I wanted to look at the architectures of ecotourism because, at the time I found out that the most, I would say innovative forms of contemporary, architecture were the one that were dealing with ecotourism because they wanted to be local, but at the same time need to accommodate more of modern needs. And I traveled all throughout and I documented, successful ecotourism project, not just their architecture, but also the infrastructure, the water system, the energy system, and the social programs that they were having. And I think this trip, in a way, congealed the approach that I still have today, which is that we cannot, as architects, only think about the building as an object. The building exists within a wider flux of materials, and each material has its own impact, but also in economic context, in socio-economic context, environmental context, where the energy is coming, where your water... The community also, right? So I think this, for me, I mean, it was quite, I mean, I can speak about this trip forever because I was arrested, I was, put in jail because I was taking photos and measuring in the middle of very, and I mean, I guess I was naive then. I didn't know it was dangerous, but anyways.
Yeah, and during this trip, I believe you started founding جذور الصحراء project, if we'd say, right?
Absolutely. The seeds of the judur were starting to
we will have some photos for it, but can you give us a brief about it?
Of course. So actually, when I started my trip, I started it obviously in the south of Morocco that I didn't know. So a lot of us Moroccans, now it's a bit different with more tourism. But back in the 2000s, in 2005, or I think 2006, when I did this trip, like a lot of Moroccans would not cross the Atlas Mountains. They would think, oh, you will die. The desert is dangerous, snakes, Scorpios, etc. And so I started my trip in the south of Morocco in the Dra Valley, which is a UNESCO biosphere. And there I met Halim Sbahi, who is a local guide, but also a local activist in the environment that was raising awareness around the advancement of sand dunes, the importance of continuing, oasis agriculture, not, over pumping water. So really an incredible individual, and that really wanted to do something for his oasis. He had studied in Marrakesh, came back, and founded an ecotourism venture and also a small project. But he wanted, in a way, to develop it more. And this is the first seed. So when I saw this person, extremely inspiring, I just felt that I had to help him one way or another. And we started slowly by slowly with also different partners, thinking about, we started first thinking that maybe an ecotourism project would be the most important thing in this oasis. But then we realized that with more than 2,000 kids that didn't have any cultural, outlet, but also with kids that were extremely musically gifted, because this is a very unique place in Morocco where in music and dance, where Hassani culture, Berber, Arabic, and Sub-Saharan cultures came together and created this very unique blend of music and dance, very, very rich. And so this culture was in a way disappearing with older people. So we realized that this was the most, urgent, to create a dance and music school to preserve these traditions, but also to give an outlet for the youth and for the children.
Okay. You started your office and practice in 2011. Can you tell us how you started it first? Then we can go back to the projects.
Yeah, so Aziza Chaouni project actually came as a succession of Bureau East. So Bureau East was like a first office that I created with the landscape, architect friend of mine from Harvard, but who was based in California. So this is how we used to start the Faz River Project, Takako Takima. But she was way too far away and it was complicated. And then I decided to create my own office to be able to continue the project in Morocco, but develop also more projects in Morocco. And the way it started, it simply started really with the Faz River project. And then a series of other projects started. all over Morocco, and then started to extend a bit in other places, like around the world. For now, again, coming back and refocusing mainly on Morocco, but on West Africa as well.
Yeah, we will see some websites and books at the end for that. While you are doing your office, you continued doing full-time assistant
Yes, yes,
professor and
yes,
professor. How did
yes.
you? How does your dual role, a full-time professor and practicing, benefit your projects?
Well, I think, again, Hashim Sarkis, it was a model for me, and he encouraged me to tell me it's actually, I mean, if you have an architecture office that does solely, architecture, it's a field that's difficult. We can very easily fall into becoming a commercial office. To be able to sustain your office, you continue to take project, can be project that you don't believe in, right? Or that are not aligning your own principles of sustainability or community impact. And to be able to continue, because it's a service of industry, where we're answering the needs and the wants of clients. We can try to influence them, but not always can we succeed. Well, I said, well, we have one life on this earth, so what is the best, Hashim? And he told me, well, then if you are teaching, you get the possibility to push certain investigation also, and doing research also on your own. It gives you the room for the research, but it gives you also this possibility to have the double hat, so to take the projects that have a meaning to you, and where you could also apply the research that you are developing in an academic setting. Because often we have deadlines that are completely unrealistic, like in Morocco, where you have to design very, very quickly, and you don't have that space for research. So very often I might research something for a long time, and then the right project would come in, and then I would apply it and test certain ideas in real life. So my office is more of a research-based office, where really I have the luxury to pick certain project, or like direct also certain project, or align my own interests and my own beliefs in a sustainable form of architecture and socially engaged architecture with what the client also, with the client goal.
Yeah. Before we go to the projects, we noticed that community engagement seems to be a big part of your work. Can you share us an example of how you have involved the community in one of your projects?
Well, I think I've involved the community in all of my projects. And if you go to my website, you would see that we have a section that's
Yes.
specific on the
Yes.
collaborative tools, because with time, and honestly, I didn't realize when I was doing it that I was doing it on purpose. For me, it just made sense that if you want a public project to succeed, especially, like a public one, you have to, and in a global south setting, especially, you need to include the local population in its development, because they're the one who's going to use it afterwards. They're the one who are going to be able to tell you exactly what their needs are, sometimes what the challenges of the land is, of what the availability of certain materials. So you learn so much from this interaction, and it ensures also that the project that you're working on would be used in the most efficient way possible. So there is some genius loci information that only locals that have been working and building in that area for a long time know, that they can share with you, but also some needs that very often are not heard,
Yes.
that would make sense to include in the project. So you want me to give you a concrete example or no?
We will see it in the project, actually. Yeah,
Yes.
I'll start with the project. So the first project was actually مشروع إعادة تأهيل نهر فاس, or Faz River Project. So I will leave it for you to tell us what
Sure.
can we learn from these projects. Yeah.
So what was important in this project was really, so this was part of my thesis that then became, this is a different iterations of it, obviously, where we focus only on the river. And the realization was, as an inhabitant of Fez, it was a very simple realization that this river that used to have very clear water was becoming very dirty, was becoming an open air sewage. But by doing a bit more research, what I realized that when it enters its water quality, when we surveyed the water quality before it enters the old city, and then which you have, it's number one, to after it leaves the old city, the quantity of pollutants skyrocketed, and especially a chromium-3, which is extremely toxic. And this was because of the leather industry that was throwing all this chemical dyes. And then The worst thing, as the map is not here, is that this water from the Faz River then goes to the largest and most fertile agricultural watershed in Morocco, where we get most of our vegetables and fruits, etc. And a lot of farmers use water from this river to
Mm.
irrigate. So for me, it was such an environmental crisis, right? That was so important to deal with. And like at the time when Fez, a century ago or more, the wastewater was there was enough water coming from the mountains to drain the wastewater away from the homes, but the city population boomed, and really, it was, you could not actually walk by this open air sewage. Imagine an open air sewer in the middle of a UNESCO World Heritage City. This is really what this river had become. And so the project, as you see, there's an environmental aspect, there's an activism aspect, because you had to convince the local authorities that this is something they had to do. So this is beyond just an urban design project. So you had to divert the wastewater, to take it to the treatment center, to uncover part of this river so that it only has clean water. And then the other part that you can see here on the 3 sites. So the one of Recife, is the one that's completed, where that was like a parking lot. And so the idea was, this is the largest pedestrian network in the world that the Medina of Fez has, was to reconvert it, kind of to like a plaza. And for the tanneries to turn them into a botanic garden, because their soil is actually extremely polluted, and move the tanneries nearby, and so that they can also be reintroduced using natural dyes. And finally, like a last site, which today unfortunately has become a parking, we had proposed it to be the largest or the only first playground in the Medina. So, in a sense, this was the idealized version. Some of it, so the biggest part for me, and again, this is a lesson for the students, is that not everything that we designed or we wanted to design happened, but the biggest, so and I remember like crying and being very upset, because at the school they teach you, where this is the design, it needs to happen like this, otherwise you don't succeed. Well, in this, I learned how to pick my battles. And so the battle here was to divert the sewage and open the river and having clean water and having these public spaces, like around it. And so that is, and to take the cars out, which we succeeded in the first site of Recife. Then the design, yes, if it could have been much better, yes. But sometimes decisions, and one more thing I was going to say is that this project won the Holcim Award, the Gold Award for sustainable construction, both in world scale and Africa, Middle East region. That was a big boost to it. That's also what helped it, actually, the city to undertake it. And
2008.
Yes, 2008 and 2009. But the big issue is that it became so visible. They had these big posters, and we had to do all these interviews, etc. It was very exciting and very important moment for a young office and a young architect. But it also had the reverse side, which in a way, I think it's so important to talk about successes, but also as failures, so that we can learn from them. But when a public project became so publicized and so public, then it gets politicized. So decisions, we need to do this, or no, I want a triumphal arch, I want this bench. So a lot of other opinions starts to compete, and one needs to keep in mind, what's the big idea? If I can uncover this river and divert so that you don't have open sewage and rats and all diseases, that's the most important thing, is that the big concept idea. The rest, well, can be done. Maybe in the future it can be made better.
Yeah. Can you share us what has been the community's response to the changes? Not, authorities or designers. We want to know what happened with the community.
They were very happy. They were, extremely happy because even the name of the river that was, it was called Wad Fez before, in the time of my grandmother. Then the new name of it, even officials on maps, was Wad Bukhararab, which is the river of trash in Moroccan. And even in officials maps, it was like the river of trash. And then now, when this project happened, it became Wad Al Jawahir, which is the diamond. Rules a river. So in a sense, yes, I think that the historical value. My grandmother used to tell me that there were fish on this river, there were songs about this river. So in a sense, the historic also value and symbolic value of this river came back, and there's also with it a sense of pride.
Qarawiyyin.
Mhm.
Yeah, I want here. I struggled with the name in the beginning, as you remember, which I understand. Qayrawan. It's
Qayrawan. It comes from Qayrawan because of Fatima Al-Fihriya. So just to make sure, the two central images is Sidi Harazem. It's not the Qarawiyyin.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes, but
Yes.
it's okay. No problem, because it's a brutalist.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the other
exactly.
one is from a different century, starting from the 7th century all the way to the 14th centuries. This library had many evolutions. So this is also a very nice story, because it is a woman's story. And we don't hear enough women's story in our culture in the Middle East and North Africa. So Al-Qarawiyyin was the mosque and its library that were built in 789 by Fatima Al-Fihriya, who was coming from Tunisia, from Karawan, and came with her father and her sister, was highly educated, and then she decided to use her inheritance to build a knowledge center, so a mosque, Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque, in the center of Fez. And she used all of her inheritance for this, and she was very keen on having a very important teaching center that has grown, over time to become one of the most famous center of knowledge in North Africa, Middle East. It was located in Fez, in the Medina of Fez. And all these madrasas have grown, around it. And the library was its crown jewels, because what knowledge without books? Books are, of everything, obviously. So they're amazing. There was an amazing collection of books. So this library was not accessible to the public. I've grown in Fez and never was able to enter inside, only if you're a university student and had the card, or if you were like a researcher. And so I was asked to restore it by a woman who was working at the Ministry of Culture. I mean, there are very few women working in restoration. I mean, now there are like a bit more in Morocco. So I was extremely grateful. And also what I also told her when I did the assessment is that fixing, like just the condition, it was in a horrible condition. The roofs were leaking. Imagine on this amazing book collection, more than 8,000 historic manuscripts, including one of the oldest known Qurans that's written on gazelle skin. And a lot of, because the Qarawiyyin University used to teach many topics, from literature to medicine to religious studies to astronomy. Maimonides was there, teaching, and for a while, as well. And so I proposed that it needs to be open also to the public. So we propose an exhibition room where some manuscript also can be exhibited. I don't have much time to explain, but when
it's okay.
The project, the Ministry of Religious Affairs took, because we also introduced a lab to restore books. So here again, for people that are listening, young architects, sometimes you have to subvert the program that's given to you. For us at the beginning was just, just fix the cracks and the building. But for me, it was such an important cultural place that it needed to open up. So, but also we needed to take care of the manuscript that were there. So the lab, a restoration manuscript lab and also scanning lab was added, and a manuscript exhibition room. But the Ministry of Culture didn't have the money to manage it, and so the Ministry of Religious Affairs took it under its arm, and until today it's still not open to the public, whereas it has all of the facilities that are ready for that. Anyway, that's the story. But
okay.
Still, advocating for it to open.
Yeah.
Sidi Harazem.
This is Sidi Harazem. Yeah.
Harazem. the masterpiece by Jean-François Zevaco, amazing complex sprawling over 12 hectares that used to have water running, you know, everywhere. I mean, in all of those little canals, you know, like that you see here. And it little by little, as I told you, as Moroccans start to prefer the beach, this thermal complex started to close down until only 20% of it remained open to the public in the early 2000s. And so I did a lot of, you know, advocacy for it, etc., starting from 2004, and only in 2017 was I able to get the Keeping It Modern grant from the Getty Foundation. This is a program that unfortunately just ceased to exist. It exists for 8 years, and it supported the development of research and conservation management plan for modern buildings of exceptional nature. So for me, of course, it was, I thought I would never win because there were projects by Frank Lloyd Wright and Mies van der Rohe and Le Corbusier that I was competing against, and by Oscar Niemeyer. But this really was a very important moment that really I understood that I was not the only one that thought this architecture was exceptional. And the Getty Foundation continued to support with, you know, other forms of support for events on the place, etc. So we completed the conservation of management plan. In February 2020, we started the rehabilitation of the first building, and then COVID hit. And there was a pause, but we still continued to activate the space. The Moroccan government allowed us, gave us the keys to all of the closed places, and we organized as volunteers a series of artist residencies and events to demonstrate that even the space as it is now, I mean, we obviously had to clean it a bit to make it a bit safe,
Yes.
host a lot of temporary events. So, again, this is a good example of adaptive reuse. Why do we need to build new construction and pollute the atmosphere even more if we could use existing buildings, and especially the ones from this post-colonial era that are incredible? Yeah, and utilize it. For me, adaptive reuse is also a huge form of sustainability.
Yeah, we have added the links of these. We will see it in the moment.
So we did a series of websites that every time, sidiharazemstation.com for the International Fair of Dakar. So my mom actually was born and spent the first few years of her life in Senegal. My grandparents were there. Yes, in Senegal, because in Senegal there is a Lebanese and Moroccan communities that are quite large. My grandfather went there when he was a child. So I have very strong ties also with Senegal. And I applied with my colleague Muqtada Gay to another Keeping It Modern grant, because I actually I was driving on my way out of Dakar with the taxi driver, and I saw these crazy triangles. And I remember my grandfather telling me about the fair. And I stopped and I met the director randomly, and we were talking, and he told me they were going to demolish one of these beautiful buildings that was, this fair was developed, but you can see in the third image, Senghor, President Senghor, who was the first president of independent Senegal, who was a poet, but he was also one of the proponents of the Pan-Africanist movement and of the Negritude movement, which wanted to reimagine a contemporary African movement of culture and of architecture. And so this was his masterpiece building. So it's a complex for an international, exhibition fair with, auditoriums and, like a bunch of different things. And both for Sidi Harazem and for this project, we actually did very extensive consultation process and collaborative design. So you can see, and we design all these games, that are board games with models, with cards, to make it more fun for people, to help us co-develop with them the future of these spaces, because some of them are empty. There are a lot of open spaces around, and we wanted to hear what different members of the communities, from children to women to other people to decision makers, for them to share with us and to work together for the future of this place.
We've seen even the website having the past and current and future for these projects. So this is another interesting project.
Yes. So this is so in a way, I started with Sidi Harazem, and then Sidi Harazem brought all of the series of other projects. This is the House of People, Beit al-Shab in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou. So here also, this was post-colonial. So the link is that they're all post-colonial public buildings that were meant in a way to offer. So in this case, it was started as the House of the Party, but has become the main, auditorium of the city. Until today, it sits 2,000 people. Is the largest venue in Ouagadougou. It has, has a set of festivals that it hosts in it, etc. And the building was built by René Faublet, that you can see here, who was actually an architect that did the houses in the French, Alps. So he was but with wood, so really vernacular architecture. So when he was asked to design this gigantic hall, he actually worked very closely with local craftsmen. So you could see the local bricks used, on the facade, and those little hats. So on the right-hand side, the image, you might ask yourself, what are those little hats? So those little hats actually look like the traditional huts, but they're this chimneys, and they allow for this amazing cooling system. So some cool air is taken from the underground, blown in the auditorium, and then the hot air just rises and leaves from these chimneys.
So this is in Sierra Leone.
Yes, in Sierra Leone. What I can tell you is that, honestly, this image, so for this project, we were asked to develop a prototype school. The government needed to build 200 schools. It had a grant from the World Bank. And so instead of developing it from Morocco, Fez, Morocco, from Toronto, I asked that I wanted to do a consultation with children to see what they wanted in the school, what was the main issues. So the model that we did here, so this is a little model, we can slide things, is so that the children could design the school and place the different buildings or different activities that they wanted. But the reason why we designed it also like this, so the kids that you see with the yellow background, they're actually blind children. In Freetown, there is a very famous school for blind children. And the reason why we designed the game like this, so even the programs have engraving and laser cutting of what they are with little logos. We wanted also the game to be used to be inclusive and to be used by these children. And actually, one of the most touching moments probably in my career is that when we did the workshop with them and they asked us to give them the game. And I said, of course, so that they can keep it and continually imagine and design different type of schools.
So they can read spaces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another project, Old Fourah Bay College, that's also another special type of project. This is in Sierra Leone. So again, started with the, with the schools, and then the Minister of Education then showed me this building and then told me, listen, Aziza, this is the oldest university in West Africa. And I said, how come I never heard of it? And said, this is called the Harvard of West Africa. It's called Old Fourah Bay College. It was opened in the early, of 1800s by the British. It was a British seminary. But very quickly, this school started like Qarawiyyin, started as a religious school, but started to teach all type of topics. And a lot of writers and poets and politicians from West Africa came to study here. And then went back, to their country. So there's a huge diaspora of people that studied at, Old Fourah Bay College. Then during the Second World War, it was used as a headquarters, for the war. Then it became the offices for the post office. Then it became a courthouse. And so it had many lives. And unfortunately, during the Civil War, all of the wood structure of the roof and of the floors got burned down. And it was just, abandoned. But all of the masonry and the steelwork remained. And so then with the World Monuments Fund, and this lady you can see here on the left, Aissatou Smith, who's a heritage specialist, we needed to find, so in a way, we're like, okay, the government of Sierra Leone has no money to restore this. This is in one of the poorest area of town. So what can we do? And so we applied for some grants, and we got the grants, and we created a partnership with the government. And now we did the
ongoing.
And we are restoring it now. And we also did a collaborative approach. which was incredible. And then so to define what should we put in here, because obviously there were so many competing, interests. And it was out of the question to turn it into a hotel or in a country club. And we needed to turn it into a space that's going to be used by the community. And so now it will have, because it's many floors, but it will host a series of different public programs, mainly for youth. Sierra Leone has a huge, most of its population is under 25.
Wow.
And mainly a dance and music school, again, so that you can see the connections. The same sponsors from the Playing for Change Foundation in Jodor Sahara in the south of Morocco. We brought them here to sponsor music, free dance and music program in Old Fourah Bay College. So to come back to Jodor Sahara, which is also...
You spoke about it before, yes.
Yes, exactly. So Jodor Sahara is a mix. It's a free music school. So we've been running the program since 2016. So again, here it's a very good example where the space and the architecture was not the most needed. When you have a limited budget, the idea was to launch the program of the free music school and the recording of traditional music, which we have on the website that you can share. And because we translated also the words. So we did research on traditional music and dance. As an architect, I added the component, the spatial component of where would this music and dance happen. But we've been running this free music and dance program, like I told you, since 2016-17. But then it grew, became so popular. At the beginning, people didn't want to send their daughters, but now it became really popular. So now we are constructing we are finishing actually this month the first 2 buildings for the school, entirely in earth and stone construction.
This is a very interesting project. The earthquake that happened in Morocco.
Yes, so the earthquake that happened in Morocco on September 8th, 2023, more than 3,000, actually 2,900 people died. You had a few hundred villages that were completely demolished. And very quickly, of course, the first effort was to house temporarily the victims and the survivors, but very quickly, with a bunch of my colleagues of engineers in Morocco, we decided to propose to the government and work with the government to develop ahead of time a solution that would be for an anti-seismic house that's that's using compressed earth bricks, mortarless. So that they could, only we have this steel reinforcement that here is a bit too much. So we're doing now prototype 2.0.
Yeah.
The idea is that you don't have any mortar, and the bricks are 95% earth and 5% cement. And the bricks are used on the floor, as you can see here, on the walls, but also on the ceiling. We invented actually the mold for this arch, compressed earth bricks, to be used on the ceiling and to rest on 2 wood beams. So the carbon footprint is very limited. The government gave us a price to not go more than $14,000. So, but the issue is that, here, so you could see the arch compressed brick. The main issue is that all these places didn't have water sanitation or electricity. So with $14,000, it was extremely difficult to complete. This is an 80-meter covered square meters covered house with in total 120 meters square with the courtyards. And we had a hard time staying within this $14,000, but because we demonstrated that, we could if it's just construction, but what about sanitation? So we separated gray and black water, and the black water goes into this ecological septic tank. This is where my training as an environmental and civil engineer came to hand, because I love to design ecological septic and water system. And the gray water goes into this subterranean gravel filtering system that then goes to, irrigate the gardens.
Yes, I will jump to the box section. We see that you have 5 books that we was able to collect and discuss about. So the desert tourism, and they have the keeping it modern, the one that discussed about Sidi Harazem and out of water, and another one, and then you have also about Shobak region in Jordan. Do you like to tell us any interesting parts of these books before we go to the awards and show some sites?
Well, I think they show the evolution of my research, how it
Yes.
started, the desert tourism really emerged. So after I finished my fellowship, my travel trip throughout the Sahara, I became the Aga Khan Fellow for 2 years at Harvard University, and I was able to teach there and also to lead more research to develop the research on desert tourism beyond just the Sahara Desert. And I did an international conference with my colleague Virginie Picon-Lefebvre, and we had a publication about it. Then when I went to the University of Toronto, I focused on ecotourism, and I developed a lab to research the topic through different deserts. And one of the project where I worked for several years with the Royal Society of Conservation of Nature was the development of a new protected area called Shobak, located right north of Petra. And this led to a new approach, really, where horizontally, architecture, landscape, ecology, nature preservation, we all work together from the beginning, where tourism infrastructure didn't come as an afterthought after a national park is created, etc. But we worked a lot on this integrated, ecological management, approach, where even architecture is considered from the very beginning. So I think this was, for me, a very important publication. And then my work on deserts led to this very important, for me, publication, Out of Water, the for Arid Climate. It just emerged from the fact that me and my colleague Liat of Margolis, we realized that when we had to look for solutions on how to deal with water or how to deal with, insulation for arid climates, we didn't find books that were specific to this region. And so, or to this climate. And this is why we looked at solutions that go beyond just architecture and landscape, but also looking at the fields of, agriculture, for example. And we looked at how these can be, integrated either in collecting water, cleaning water, distributing water, etc.
Yeah, each of these books actually needs another lecture because it's valuable information there. I would like to go to the awards. These photos of the previous 2008 and 2009 awards of the River of Faz.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
What you can see, what's in common is that I always wear. Hold on, just give me.
you always wear something Moroccan. Yes.
Exactly. So this is something that doesn't change. That
Yeah.
I always wear Moroccan outfit because I'm very proud of our traditions and of our craft.
And also, we would like to congratulate you for the new award.
Oh, thank you.
I put the link here so people can refer to it and see. But can you tell us brief about it before we wrap up?
Sure. So that the award is handed by the Award Monuments Fund, which is a non-for-profit that in a way funds the rehabilitation of many heritage places like the Taj Mahal or Easter Island, for example. And I've been having like a relationship with them since 2019, but this award goes beyond just the work that I do with them, but it's really to celebrate somebody who's very committed to the rehabilitation and safeguarding and raising awareness about heritage. And I guess you've seen it through my work. This is a thing that I feel that it is our role also as architects, not just because adaptive reuse is more sustainable, but all these buildings, even in the recent history in the 20th century, are part of our history, can teach us things. Obviously not all of them are worth of preserving. Some can be unsafe, etc. But some landmark ones are so important. And if we are not advocate for them, they're going to disappear. But actually, the award was mainly handed to me this year because of the volunteer work I've done for the post-earthquake effort and the of innovations when, for example, for the different bricks that we developed and the interlocking bricks and also the arch bricks and the involvement also with the community, because for that one also we worked with survivors in that village to develop the ideal plan. So for all those things, I'm happy that I received the award.
Yeah, actually, there are a couple of photos here, but we screenshot of the website. These are the
Yeah.
websites that we was able to collect, but also your Instagram, and this is very interesting part that we wanted also to share our insight here. That usually architects put their projects in their website, but what we've seen here actually. Each time you create a new website, new page for specifically for this project. Is that part of trying to have it a sustainable project by itself runs? Can you tell us?
Yes, of course. I think this is just, for me, again, it developed as an obvious continuation of the approach where I see myself, I'm not the most important person in the project. I'm one of many, and that this project belongs to the users, right? And that for me, it's super important to empower the users and the younger generations, as well. All of this project had usually integrated in them training of young, of architects and the preservation of modern heritage, or in, earth construction. And so I think for me, it's important that the project becomes alive on their own. Even if I die tomorrow, for example, I would like this project to continue. And hopefully I would have empowered enough people to continue with me now, or continue, in the future when I'm not here anymore, and to love this project as much as I do.
Yeah, I will have my last question as also as a part of your advice to the community and audience and architects, etc. In terms of your approach of initiating projects, usually architects promote their services to clients, etc. But you're in your role, actually, you initiate projects. You try to find the fundraising. You try to initiate the project. Can you tell us your advice here about it?
Of course. I mean, first of all, I feel that sometimes it's the project who's calling me, right? It's like I receive a calling that I need to do this, like otherwise who will do it? And so I need to give it a shot, even if it will fail. I mean, sometimes things fail. The number of projects that we try to take, off the ground that didn't make it, I can make a very, very long list. So how to go about it? I think it's, yes, you need to have a calling, and to speak to you. The project needs to have a either personal meaning, or that you judge that this is a very important project for the community and can make a big change in that community, or play a restorative role. And so then when you have that passion, I feel that, everything can happen. So the things can take a long time for this type of self-initiated project. One should not lose steam. I mean, sometimes say I'm crazy. Why am I doing this? This is never going to work. The Sierra Leone project took a long time to pick up the ground, etc. Now, alhamdulillah, it's getting realized. Sidi Harazem also is taking a long time, but one still needs to, in a way, try to see if there are any state funds, international funds, if there are any local benefactors. Now there is all this fundraising platforms. But my advice is to really start small. One should not start with very big, like, for example, the Sahara project. We had very little fun, and we realized ideally, yes, we would love to have a building, but with the classes in this concrete cafe that was not meant for classes, that was hot, but for us, it was better to have those classes and start the program and have an impact on the kids, rather than to have like a beautiful building, but waste of all this time where we cannot offer classes to the children. So I think start with small incremental steps.
Aziza, thank you again. I would like to give an opportunity for any of the audience if they have question, then we can wrap up immediately. So to not delay you more, we know that you have very short time. So if anyone have question, they can raise their hand or they send it now, or we can wrap up. We'll just wait for 30 seconds or something, then.
Okay, people are shy.
Okay, I think we really wanted to have more time to go in detail. Sorry.
So Wael, left a very nice comment. So thank you so much, Wael, for.
Okay, he sent it to you directly because I can't see it.
Oh yes,
in the chat. It's okay, fine. Okay, thank you, Architect Aziza, again for this opportunity, and hopefully we will do something about Eli later on about the Kopo project, and see you soon. Thank you.
See you very soon. Shukran.
Thank you. مع السلامة. Bye bye.